Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 12, Evolution or Conscious Effort, from The Lost Word, Its Hidden Meaning by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 11, Evolution or Conscious Effort. We have discussed in the preceding chapter the phenomenon of cosmic consciousness, introducing Dr. Bucky as our principal witness and using corroborating evidence of other authorities. Having established a preponderance of evidence in favor of a consciousness, call it what you will, superior to normal self-consciousness, we find ourselves not fully in agreement with Dr. Bucky in connection with one aspect of the question. We may only judge, from the absence of any information to the contrary, that Dr. Bucky considers cosmic consciousness a product of evolution and not something to be acquired through the conscious effort of the individual. Just as the race began with simple consciousness and evolved to the acquisition of self-consciousness, he postulates it to be the plan of the Supreme Architect, that the entire race eventually evolved to cosmic consciousness. He cites the fact that, in accordance with the known law of evolution, at one time a few individuals must have appeared possessed of self-consciousness in advance of the race. Likewise, a few individuals have appeared possessed of cosmic consciousness, indicating the inherent potential in the race and suggesting that all will eventually evolve to that state. While we agree with his conclusion that all will eventually evolve to that state, he leaves an opening in his argument of which the skeptic will be quick to take advantage. His analogy is incorrect, for while a race possessed of but simple consciousness, not having an objective consciousness, could but wait for evolution to advance it to the stage of self-consciousness. Once that state is acquired and the self-conscious individual becomes capable of thinking and reasoning, he can accomplish that with his self-consciousness, which the simple conscious need wait for evolution to do for them. This is illustrated in the lodge. Throughout the first 3 steps of initiation, the lodge is symbolical of the evolutionary process. It advances all candidates to the same place as all who have gone that way before. When, however, the candidate assumes himself to be a master mason, he is informed that such is not the case, and that, while heretofore he has had someone to pray for him, he must now pray for himself. In other words, the lodge, or evolution, has brought the candidate or individual to the level of self-consciousness. He can now, presumably, think for himself. He has acquired a will, and with it the freedom of choice, and he must thereafter do for himself that which previously was done for him. The fallacy, in fact the outstanding weakness in Dr. Bucky's theory, is that he has overlooked the ancient axiom that nature unaided fails. As we observed, Dr. Bucky does not allow in his theory for the conscious effort of the individual in acquiring cosmic consciousness without waiting for the natural results of evolution. If he is correct that it cannot be acquired, then obviously it cannot be the long-lost word of the master's degree. For all Masonic philosophy is builded upon the premise of a search for a lost word or knowledge or state of being, that such knowledge was at one time at man's disposal and that it will be found again. Else we are but made ridiculous when we are given a substitute to be used until future generations shall discover the right. It is useless to search for a condition or state of being which can only come about through natural evolution. Firstly, because until the time is propitious, the search will of necessity be fruitless. Secondly, when the time is at hand, that is when the evolutionary course is run, no search will be necessary. The condition will, as it were, be thrust upon humanity. Ouspensky is likewise critical of this view, although not from the Masonic standpoint, in which he evinces no interest in tertium organum. He calls attention to certain imperfections in the book, cosmic consciousness, arising from what he terms a strange indecisiveness of Dr. Bucky's, from his timidity in asserting the dominant significance of the new consciousness. He continues his criticism. We may say further, with regard to Dr. Bucky's entire book, that touching the idea of the natural growth of consciousness, he does not notice that these faculties do not unfold themselves perforce. Conscious work on them is necessary. And he does not dwell at all on conscious efforts in this direction, on the idea of the culture of cosmic consciousness. Meanwhile, there exists a whole series of psychological teachings, occultism, yoga, etc., and a large literature having in view a systematic culture of the higher consciousness. Dr. Bucky does not remark this and insists upon the idea of natural growth, although he himself several times touches upon the culture of consciousness. Dr. Bucky, like many others, does not pay sufficient attention to the present. That new consciousness which men may discover or unfold in themselves now is indeed far more important than that which may or may not appear in other men millenniums hence. Perhaps I have said enough to show what, of course, was sufficient evidence to me that however it may be disguised, there is some reality beneath all these, some body of real experience of no little value and importance which has been attained in India by a portion, at any rate, of those who have claimed it, illumination or the mystical experience. Here is generous support of our contention that cosmic consciousness is possible of acquisition through the definite conscious efforts of the individual. Man can do something about it without waiting with folded hands until evolution brings it about. Here is the rod of the caduceus, the straight and narrow path which leads to mastership, rather than the winding paths of the entwined serpents which he without knowledge must travel. It also lends reason to the biblical admonishment given the entered apprentice. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Ouspensky refers to a large literature having in view a systematic culture of the higher consciousness. Let us explore some of this literature and attempt to corroborate his views that this higher consciousness can be cultivated. The jiva, soul, is directed on its way by the supreme wisdom acquired by yoga. This statement is supplemented by a footnote as follows. Compare this esoteric tenet with the Gnostic doctrine found in Pistis Sophia, knowledge wisdom, in which treatise Sophia Achamoth is shown lost in the waters of chaos, matter, on her way to supreme light, and Christos delivering and helping her on the right path. Note well, Christos with the Gnostics meant the impersonal principle, the Atman of the universe, and the Atma within every man's soul, not Jesus, though in the old Coptic manuscripts, in the British Museum, Christos is almost constantly replaced by Jesus. Yoga is a system of practice whereby the personal consciousness is linked to the universal conscious energy. Its object is direct, first-hand experience of those phases of reality which are the basis of all religions. The founders of religions are persons who have such experiences, and the contention of practical occultists is that this kind of experience may be repeated. Whenever the right conditions are provided, it is not a capricious gift from on high. It is not miraculous. Rare it may be, but it is perfectly natural, and a human being who addresses himself earnestly to preparing himself for this kind of experience will find what he seeks. He who thinketh constantly and fixedly of me, Krishna, letting not his mind ever stray toward another object, will be able to find me without overmuch trouble. Yea, he will find me. Will that devoted one? C.G. Jung, writing of the mandalas drawn by some of his patients, states, in the light of such historical parallels, the mandala either symbolizes the divine being, hitherto hidden and dormant in the body, and now extracted and revivified, or it symbolizes the vessel or the room in which the transformation of man into a divine being takes place. In most of the religions of the ancient world, the relation between the soul and God has been represented as a return of the soul to God. A yearning for God, a kind of divine homesickness, finds expression in most religions. But the road that is to lead us home and the reception which the soul may expect in the Father's house have been represented in very different ways, in different countries and different languages. We can divide the opinions held and the hopes expressed on this subject into two classes. According to some religious teachers, a return of the soul to God is possible after death only, and we shall see ever so many attempts, ever so many bridges thrown by hope and faith across the gulf which seems to separate the human from the divine. According to other teachers, the final beatitude of the soul can be achieved even in this life, nay, must be achieved in this life if it is to bear fruit in the next. That beatitude requires no bridges, it requires knowledge only, knowledge of the necessary unity of what is divine in man with what is divine in God. This unity has for ages been symbolized by the six-pointed star formed by uniting two equilateral triangles. The Brahmins call it self-knowledge, that is to say, the knowledge that our true self, if it is anything, can only be that self which is all in all, and beside which there is nothing else. Sometimes this conception of the intimate relation between the human and the divine natures comes in suddenly as the result of unexplained intuition or self-recollection. Sometimes, however, it seems as if the force of logic had driven the human mind to the same result. If God had once been recognized as the infinite in nature and the soul as the infinite, in man it seemed to follow that there could not be two infinites. Edward Carpenter also names the higher consciousness cosmic consciousness. Carpenter traveled extensively in the Orient, spent much time in India, and there contacted men who were striving to attain this experience. He states that the means of acquisition has already been found in the Orient. He says, the West seeks the individual consciousness, the enriched mind, ready perceptions and memories, individual hopes and fears, ambitions, loves, conquests. The self, the local self, in all its phases and forms, and sorely doubts whether such a thing as an universal consciousness exists. The East seeks the universal consciousness, and in those cases where its quest succeeds, individual self and life thin away to a mere film, and are only the shadows cast by the glory revealed beyond. Thus, two of our authorities literally give the Masonic directive toward light, look to the East. Heeding this advice, let us examine some additional statements. The Vedanta philosophy rests on the fundamental conviction of the Vedantist that the soul and the absolute being or Brahman are one in their essence. Great have been the disputes among the learned as to the meaning of the word nirvana. The important thing to see and admit is that under cover of this and other similar terms, there does exist a real and recognizable fact, that is, a state of consciousness in some sense, which has been experienced over and over again, and which, to those who have experienced it in ever so slight a degree, has appeared worthy of lifelong pursuit and devotion. That in every age of the world and in almost every country, there has been a body of doctrine handed down, which, with whatever variations and obscurations, has clustered round two or three central ideas, of which perhaps that of emancipation from self through repeated births is the most important. And that thousands of individuals in reaching a certain stage of evolution have corroborated and are constantly corroborating from their own experience the main points of this doctrine. That there must have existed in India or in some neighboring region from which India drew its tradition, before all history, teachers who saw these occult facts and understood them well, probably better than the teachers of historical times, and who had themselves reached a stage of evolution at least equal to any that has been attained since. As to the specific question of attainment of illumination, Carpenter is of the opinion that while apparently some individuals in rare cases have attained illumination through what he calls their own spontaneous development, the individuals who attain enlightenment without instruction from a guru or teacher are few and far between. Swami Akhilananda is in complete agreement and uses almost the identical words of Carpenter. He agrees that there are a few cases in religious history where individuals, both men and women, have had superconscious experiences of God without conscious directed effort. But he emphatically adds, such cases are few and far between in both the East and the West. There are also other persons who discipline themselves enough to have these high spiritual experiences and superconscious states. Through these various authorities, we have attempted to answer two of the questions propounded in closing the preceding chapter. It is obvious that while Dr. Bucky is correct that in some cases cosmic consciousness is the work of evolution, it is equally true that one is not wholly dependent on the evolutionary process but can consciously strive for, and in many cases attain, cosmic consciousness. There remains to be answered the question of the connection of such consciousness with the secret doctrine in Freemasonry, and we shall endeavor to develop that phase of the problem in the succeeding chapters. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.